After a two-day meeting that ended on Tuesday, the Monetary Policy Committee of the Central Bank of Nigeria retained the benchmark interest rate at 11.5% while keeping other monetary parameters steady. Analysts had last week predicted that the CBN might tighten monetary policy during its first meeting in the year. The committee, however, left the key policy rates unchanged. The governor of CBN, Godwin Emefiele, on Tuesday announced that the MPC decided to leave the interest rate unchanged at 11.5% alongside other parameters as some advanced economies had signaled intentions to increase the rate. He said the major focus of the developed economies was affecting inflation. According to him, the MPC believes that its current stance of price and monetary stability is conducive for growth. Meanwhile, some analysts said the development meant tougher days ahead for Nigerians and companies, while others said the Monetary Policy Committee had no choice but to leave the key rates unchanged. And so let's make sense of this development now. Dr. Leke, Ebenezer, is an economist. He joins me now via the telephone. Thank you, Dr. Leke. Happy New Year to you. It's good to have you again on the show this year.
Yeah, same to you. Thanks for having me on the show this morning.
Yeah. Okay, rising from its two-day meeting that ended on Tuesday, the Committee of the Central Bank of Nigeria decided to retain the benchmark interest rate unchanged at 11.5%, while other parameters are also at the same level. How do you respond to the committee's decision? Is it timely? Is this time to leave it unchanged, or they could have done otherwise?
Okay, thank you very much for that question. The decision of the FTC was based on two major goals, two major macroeconomic goals. Like I always say, every economy has a goal that you pursue. And the four basic macroeconomic goals are price stability, economic growth, balance of payment, and, even distribution of wealth. So the FTC, having studied all the parameters, decided there are two things to be pursued at this time, which is price stability and economic growth. And for that to be achieved, those key parameters have to be kept at that rate they are, because if any change is done to them to achieve price stability and economic growth might be difficult, given the factors that other factors that cannot be controlled that is affecting the economy. So that decision based on price stability and economic growth, macroeconomic goals, they are very, very on point.
Okay. When you talk about price stability, at the moment, the inflation seems to be biting hard on the nation, and Nigerian seems to be feeling it. And so how do you reconcile the fact that inflation has reversed its previous downward trend to about 15.63% in December? And I mean, compared to what the CBN is talking about now in terms of price stability, how do you reconcile that?
Okay, thank you very much. The inflation rate that we have right now, of course, as a result of expansion in consumption. And which, if there is an expansion in consumption, it brings about increase in the GDP. However, like I always say, most times, everybody look at the short-term effect of when you have this type of inflation, because there are different types of inflation. And so most people always, generalize the inflation rate and look at the negativity of it. However, there are some situations where when you have inflation, it will drive increase in output and bring about expansion in the economy. And then the government can now use monetary policy to control the side effect. And that is the type of inflation we are having. right now. This inflation came as a result of, expansion in consumption, like I said. But the government is trying so hard to balance it through the agricultural sector. So invest, because if you increase, anytime there is a rise in prices of goods and services, which is inflation, then when government step in by increasing domestic investment, it will balance out whatever pressure it can put on an average man. Although that might not be in the short term, but in the medium and long term run, everything will balance out, and then, it will be a win-win situation. When there is increase in production, then before we do it, the pressure of inflation will fizzle out, from people. People will no longer be feeling it the way it should be. So the type of inflation we're having right now, even though in the short term people will be going through a lot, but the long run effect is that it will boost output, increase investment, and the pressure will balance out over time, which is
okay. Let's dwell more on that type of inflation. Now that you talk about the types of inflation, if you look at the core inflation, which is outside the consumer price index, I mean, you talk about other products that are not consumables. That's called inflation, which is about 13.5% or so in December. But if you look at the wide headline inflation is around 15.63, and then you have the food inflation, which is consumer price index, at about 17.37% in December. I mean, one would have expected that CBN factor these types of inflation, especially the food inflation, which is core, major for the average Nigerian, while making decision at their first meeting. You don't think this will make any difference?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. The CBN has realized that because the consumer price index is not favorable, so the CBN decided that they are going to reduce the pressure of inflation from the agricultural sector. So they understand that, when people, consumer goods, when people are feeling the pain in terms of inflation, what can the government do to ease the pressure? So you have to look at what sector of the economy needs to be boosted, so that when that sector is boosted, then, the pressure can be eased out. And that's why I said they have a clear-cut plan of, reducing the pressure of consumer inflation from the agricultural sector. They stated it. They are going to put a lot of money in the agricultural sector, so that when there's food produce, commodity production in high quantity, that can drive down the pressure of inflation on average individual.
There were expectations that the CBN could have tapered with its rate, either to create a kind of attractions to the Nigerian business environment. Hence, there's been speculations around policy rate normalization in the US and elsewhere in Europe. So do you think the CBN took risk by leaving rates unchanged, factoring in the interest rate normalization in other developed economies?
Yeah. The decision of the MPC at this time has been considered critically. If you look at the statement that is rolled out by the committee, now they realize that because we in part of the world, especially developing economy, there is a slow growth rate in almost every sector. The pandemic has really dealt with a lot of sectors in the economy. And then, the country is just trying to battle with them. So I would consider that they realize that if we want to achieve all the macroeconomic goals at the same time, there's going to be issues. Because, when you are making policies, when you are making decisions, you don't only make decisions based on some sentiment, because you have to look at the consequence of that decision. And so I would consider the consequence of, adjusting the inflation rate to suit the business men the consequences may have a far more reaching impact on an average individual and even some other, sector of the economy. So it is better that they put it at that rate so that that can enable investors to supply more. Don't forget the law of supply says that the higher the price, the higher the supply. And as the business more when the price is high. So when they look at all of these factors, what effect will it have on businessmen, what effect will it have on an average individual, it is better to keep the rate at this level and not to do any adjustment so that they can balance the supply side of the economy and the demand side of the economy. Yes, the other part of the world is done a lot of adjustment to their parameters so that it will suit them, but don't forget, whatever that is happening to Nigeria is peculiar to Nigeria, and the decisions we have to make have to be in tandem with what exactly are the goals we are driving at. And I've told you the two major goals they want to achieve is price stability and economic growth, and that's why they kept the rate at this point.
Some analysts have said the decision, by the MPC to retain the monetary parameters, this could, pose tougher, tougher conditions ahead for Nigerians and maybe companies here. So, although it's in between, a bit of debate here. Some are in support, why the CBN, left it, and some are not in support. So, let me ask you, where do you stand in all of this? Do you think these current interest rate and some other parameters left unchanged means tougher days ahead for Nigeria?
Yeah, like I said, keeping all the parameters at this rate is a win-win situation for everybody. Though the short-term pressure will be on the demand side of the economy. And I use the word short-term pressure. When you have decisions have consequences, and so you don't just make them. And then the MPC haven't looked at the supply side of the economy and the demand side. They know that if we keep this monetary rate, and if all these parameters are kept the way they are, one side is going to suffer, which is the demand side of the economy. So they came up with a strategy that what exactly will bring the pressure on the demand side of the economy, and that is the consumer demand. Because when prices of products are high, an average individual is suffering. And so they came up with a plan that, okay, to cushion that effect, what we need to do is to put a lot of money in the agricultural sector, and so to balance out the pressure. So for me, I am on the side that this rate should be kept like that. The cash reserve ratio is still left the same. I told you the cash reserve ratio being kept at that point makes it easy for banks to be able to give money to businessmen to do business. And when they do business and they do supply, there will be competition, there will be increase in investment, there will be increase in the level of output, and then before you know it, consumption will rise. And that is, those are all the parameters of GDP, because the four parameters of GDP is consumption, investment, government expenditure, and net export. So all of these things will be taken care of. So if people are looking at it that the rate should have been adjusted just from only supply side of the economy, it will not be fair to the demand side of the economy in the long run. So I feel that this decision is right, and the reasons are genuine.
Okay, let's look at one key issue before I let you go, Dr. Leke. If you look, we are in the pre-election year, and if you look at the cash reserve ratio still left unchanged at 27.5%, one would have thought that the CBN could have perhaps increased, that tool a little bit to reduce the money in circulation. How would you respond to that? Do you think this will make any difference? Because, of course, we expect that there will be a lot of money in circulation because of campaigns and all of that due to the pre-election year and activities in the year.
Yes. Well, that is one approach. Yes, you are right. If cash reserve ratio is increased, it will reduce the level of money supply. Don't forget that when there is a decrease in level of money supply, that will lead to deflation. So government will not just make that decision just to reduce supply of money because political issue is coming up. However, having said that, black money. What is black money? Black money are monies that are moving around years before or days before election that do not have account. And so a lot of that will be happening in the political space. But don't forget that the CBN is trying as much as possible to separate the economy from the politics in the country. Because our political system is so tied to our economic system. If they make any decision in politics now, it affects the whole economy. And so the only way to achieve that is that don't let us keep associating our economic sector to the political sector. So let's make decisions that will affect the economic sector. Don't let's use political factors or the political situation to be making decisions in monetary policy. Because if you are doing that, you keep tying the economy to the politics. And that's not good for.
So in other words, you are saying it to be too early to start factoring that in monetary decisions and policies. Well, on this note, I really want to thank you, Dr. Leke. Ebenezer is an economist. Thank you for your time on Business Breakfast.